They arrived on a Tuesday, because of course they did. Tuesdays are universally the most inconvenient day for an alien invasion. The Galactic Hegemony's flagship, a vessel roughly the size of Rhode Island, hovered above the United Nations building in New York. Smaller ships, and by smaller, I mean merely aircraft carrier-sized, positioned themselves above every major capital city on Earth. People of Earth. Grand Admiral Zex Toral's voice boomed from seemingly everywhere at once. Your planet has been selected for incorporation into the glorious hegemony. Please surrender immediately. There was a pause. We have forms. The world leaders gathered in emergency session, looked at each other with expressions ranging from terror to confusion. Did he just say forms? The President of France whispered. The Secretary General stepped forward. Grand Admiral, we request a meeting to discuss terms. Exactly 43 minutes later, Zex Toral materialized in the UN chamber. 7 feet tall, with iridescent scales and 4 arms, he carried what appeared to be a tablet the size of a coffee table. Terms? The terms are simple. You surrender, we take over, minimal discomfort all around. Just sign here. He slid the tablet forward, displaying a document titled Standard Planetary Acquisition Form XJ 2997B. The Secretary General cleared his throat. We'll need time to review this document. Zex Toral blinked all 3 of his eyes in sequence. Review. It's a surrender document. You sign, we conquer. What's to review? Protocol, Grand Admiral, said a voice from the back of the room. A woman in a gray suit walked forward, adjusting her glasses. I'm Elena Chen, Earth's newly appointed submission processing agent. You're what? Zex Toral's head frills twitched. Every official document submitted to Earth governments must go through proper channels, Elena explained, her voice as dry as unbuttered toast. I'll need to review this for compliance with our submission standards. The alien commander looked around the room, clearly expecting panic, maybe some screaming or begging. Instead, he found humans pulling out notepads and discussing procedural requirements. Your species is about to be conquered, and you're worried about proper filing, Zex Toral asked incredulously. Elena took the tablet. Grand Admiral, you'll find that on Earth, proper filing is everything. I'll have my initial compliance review completed within 5 business days. 5 days? But would you prefer to wait for the next quarterly submission window? That opens in approximately 3 months. Zex Toral's frills deflated slightly. 5 days is acceptable. As the alien materialized back to his ship, Elena turned to the world leaders. Well, that buys us some time. Do you actually know how to process alien conquest paperwork? The British Prime Minister asked. Elena smiled thinly. No one does. And that's exactly what's going to save us. Elena Chen hadn't slept in 3 days, and it showed only in the 6 empty coffee cups scattered across her desk. Her eyes, however, gleamed with the special light of someone who had found a loophole big enough to drive a planet through. Found something? General Rivera asked, leaning against the doorframe of her hastily assembled office beneath the UN building. Elena held up the alien tablet. Oh, I found everything. Their conquest document is riddled with errors that would make a first-year law student cringe, such as, well, for starters, they refer to us as carbon-based sentients of Sol 3, but then later call us oxygen-dependent bipeds of G-class star system 2458b, different classification systems in the same legal document. She laughed. Amateur hour. On the 4th day, when Grand Admiral Zex Toral materialized in the UN chamber expecting a surrender signature, Elena handed him a document the size of a phone book. What is this? He demanded, his scales shifting to an annoyed purple. Form QR7. Request for clarification. Elena replied smoothly. We've identified 342 points requiring further explanation before we can proceed. 300 and. The alien commander's frills stood straight up. This is absurd. Perhaps, Elena adjusted her glasses, but necessary for proper processing. Section 47. Paragraph 9 of your own document states all annexations must comply with local administrative requirements. While Zex Toral steamed, quite literally as his body temperature rose, world governments were mobilizing. Military installations disguised as administrative processing centers sprang up. Scientists pored over scans of the alien vessels. Diplomats quietly reached out to other species who might have grievances with the hegemony. This will take weeks to address, Zex Toral growled. Fortunately, Elena said with a smile that never reached her eyes, our next available processing window isn't for another 3 months anyway. Take your time. After the commander vanished in a huff of teleportation energy, the Secretary General approached Elena. Will this work? It already is, she replied, watching displays showing the alien fleet. 3 of their ships just left orbit, probably going to consult with their legal department. And when they come back with answers, Elena's smile turned predatory. Then we introduce them to the wonderful world of bureaucratic compliance requirements. The Secretary General shuddered. God help them. God helps those who help themselves. Elena replied, already drafting her next procedural weapon, and file in triplicate. 2 months later the hegemony returned with a stack of answers that, if printed, would have deforested a small country. Grand Admiral Zex Toral's frills drooped with exhaustion as he presented the response documents to Elena. 342 clarifications as requested, he said, unable to keep the weariness from his voice. Now shall we proceed with the surrender? Elena made a show of examining the first few pages before looking up with what could only be described as bureaucratic disappointment. Oh dear, she said, not sounding sorry at all. This simply won't do. What? Zex Toral's scales flushed an angry crimson. We answered every single one of your ridiculous questions. Yes, but you failed to follow proper interspecies documentation protocol for submission. The alien commander's third eye twitched violently. What interspecies documentation protocol? Elena slid across a tablet displaying an impossibly complex document with the UN seal hastily photoshopped onto it. This one. Section 12. Clearly states all interspecies legal documents must be submitted in triplicate, with each copy embossed with the originating species governmental seal, notarized by a neutral third-party species, and printed on acid-free paper derived from non-sentient plant life. That's we didn't. You just made that up. Zex Toral sputtered. Elena blinked innocently. Did we? I'm afraid Earth takes proper filing very seriously, Admiral. Failure to comply with EISDP would invalidate any agreement we might reach. The alien commander looked like he might explode. Instead, he took a deep breath that sounded like a kettle boiling. Commander Vril, he barked into a wrist communicator. A harried-looking alien with similar features but paler scales materialized beside him. You called, Grand Admiral. You are now in charge of Earth paperwork compliance. Commander Vril's expression shifted from confusion to horror faster than light speed. But sir, I'm a military strategy. That's an order, Commander. Meanwhile, across the globe humanity's defenses were growing stronger. Alien technology gleaned from routine administrative inspections was being reverse-engineered. Orbital platforms disguised as document processing satellites were nearly operational. As Commander Vril began the horrifying process of learning Earth's made-up protocols, Elena leaned back in her chair. You've conquered 1,000 worlds with your battleships, she murmured to herself, watching the increasingly frustrated aliens. But you've never faced a species that weaponized bureaucracy. The Secretary General, overhearing, suppressed a laugh. If paperwork were firepower, humanity would rule the galaxy. Who says we won't? Elena replied, drafting 17 new compliance forms, one form at a time. We need to stall longer, Elena announced at the emergency UN session. Their patience is wearing thin. The German Chancellor raised an eyebrow. Thinner than the Admiral's frills when you told him all documents needed to be translated into Welsh. Much thinner, Elena confirmed. So we're establishing committees. 3 days later, Commander Vril found himself staring at a scheduling nightmare. 17 different committees had been formed, each with impressively meaningless names like Subcommittee on Pre-Acquisition Taxonomic Verification and Joint Commission on Interstellar Documentation Standards. You expect us to attend all these meetings? Vril asked, his scales pale with dread. Of course, Elena replied sweetly. Each committee requires alien representation as mandated by Section 34 of the Interspecies Regulatory Compliance Act. But they're all scheduled simultaneously. Elena feigned surprise. Are they? How unfortunate. I suppose you'll need to send 17 different representatives. In orbit, the hegemony fleet was showing signs of strain. Ships designed for conquest weren't equipped for extended diplomatic missions. Soldiers trained for battle were going stir-crazy performing clerical work. Sir, one of Zex Toral's officers reported, morale is dropping. The troops are asking when we'll actually conquer something. Soon, the Grand Admiral promised, though his voice lacked conviction. His gaze wandered to the stack of committee invitations on his desk and his third eye developed another twitch. Meanwhile, Earth's preparations continued behind the bureaucratic smokescreen. Military satellites disguised as orbital filing cabinets moved into position. Scientists worked around the clock incorporating alien technology into Earth's defenses. In a secured bunker, General Rivera reviewed the latest progress report. How much longer do you need? He asked Elena during a rare break between committee meetings. She checked her watch. 2 more weeks should do it. And can your paperwork hold them off that long? Elena smiled the smile that had launched 1,000 forms. General, I haven't even introduced them to our tax code yet. 3 weeks of committee meetings had pushed Commander Vril to the edge of sanity. His once pristine uniform hung wrinkled from his frame, and his scales had taken on a sickly gray hue that hegemony medical officers assured him was just bureaucracy poisoning. When Elena requested an emergency session with the alien leadership, Vril actually looked relieved. Finally, progress. Thank you for coming on such short notice, Elena said, her voice grave as she addressed Zex Toral and his increasingly haggard staff. I'm afraid we've encountered a serious issue with the conquest proceedings. The Grand Admiral's eye twitch had become so pronounced that human medical staff had offered him medication. What, now? Each word dropped like a stone. Elena dramatically flipped through a massive binder before looking up with perfectly crafted concern. It appears the entire process has been invalid from the beginning. You never submitted Form 27B6. Silence fell over the room like a funeral shroud. Form 27B6, Vril repeated, his voice hollow. Yes, the preliminary notice of intent to conquer a Class C sentient species. Elena adjusted her glasses. It's absolutely required for any legitimate planetary acquisition. Zex Toral turned to his administrative officer. Do we have this form? The officer frantically searched through their database. I don't see any record of Form 27B6 in our conquest protocol, sir. That's because it doesn't exist, Vril whispered too quietly for anyone to hear, staring into the bureaucratic abyss. Elena cleared her throat. Perhaps your records are incomplete. I suggest you contact your central government for clarification. That afternoon, the hegemony sent 3 ships back to their homeworld, desperately searching for the mythical form. They returned 2 weeks later, empty-handed and broken-spirited. Our archivists have no record of this form, Zex Toral admitted, his frills drooping in defeat. How unfortunate, Elena replied, somehow keeping a straight face. In that case, perhaps we can help you draft a suitable replacement document. The Grand Admiral's relief was palpable. Yes, that would be acceptable. Excellent. We'll need to establish a drafting committee, of course, and a review panel, and naturally a certification board to validate the final document. Vril made a sound like air escaping from a punctured tire. The process should take no more than 3 months if we expedite things. Zex Toral's right eye began to twitch in harmony with his left. 3 months to draft one form. Actually, that's quite fast by Earth standards, Elena assured him. Our own environmental permit applications typically take years. As the alien delegation left the room, Elena caught General Rivera's questioning look. The defense grid will be fully operational in 2 months, she murmured. We just need to keep them distracted a little longer. And if they realize Form 27B6 doesn't exist, Elena smiled, then we'll introduce them to Form 27B7, which is twice as complicated and requires approval from a committee that only meets during lunar eclipses. As the hegemony delegates slogged through the 12th subcommittee meeting on Form 27B6 drafting procedures, Elena entered with a fresh stack of documents and a smile that made Commander Vril physically recoil. Good news, she announced. While reviewing your conquest application, we've identified a path forward that might expedite the process. Zex Toral's frills perked up for the first time in weeks. You have. Absolutely. We just need proof of your planetary conquest insurance coverage. The room fell silent, except for the sound of Vrill's forehead hitting the table. Our what? Zex Toral asked. Your insurance policy, Elena repeated, sliding across a document thicker than a phone book. This outlines the minimum coverage requirements for any species seeking to conquer Earth. The Grand Admiral leafed through the first few pages, his third eye widening. Pre-existing planetary conditions, indigenous species displacement coverage, cultural heritage loss riders, all standard, Elena assured him. You wouldn't want to be liable for any unforeseen consequences of your conquest, would you? That would be fiscally irresponsible. 5 hours later, the hegemony's chief accountant materialized in orbit, summoned from across 3-star systems. The diminutive alien, whose species had evolved specifically to handle complex calculations, took one look at Earth's insurance requirements, and promptly requested a vacation. The premium calculations alone will take weeks, the accountant moaned. These actuarial tables are Byzantine. Actually, Elena said, making a correction on page 394, we've revised the tables. The risk factors need to account for Earth's unique position in the galactic arm. The following day, 10 more accounting ships arrived. Their crews spread across conference rooms worldwide, drowning in spreadsheets and muttering about deductibles. In a secure bunker beneath Geneva, the Secretary-General received Elena's latest progress report. They're now debating whether humanity's tendency to keep dangerous pets qualifies as a pre-existing condition, she explained. I've suggested we need a rider specifically for cats. How much longer until our defenses are ready? He asked. Elena checked her tablet. 17 days. But I can stretch it to 30 if needed. How? She held up a slim folder labeled Riders for coverage of potential temporal paradoxes, resulting from near-light-speed military operations. I haven't shown them this yet. Their accountants will have nervous breakdowns trying to calculate the premiums for time dilation risks. 3 months into what was supposed to be a routine planetary conquest, the hegemony's once mighty fleet resembled nothing so much as a floating office complex. Ships designed for interstellar warfare now housed endless rows of desks where alien warriors turned reluctant clerks processed paperwork instead of planets. Elena entered the main conference room where Zex Toral was arguing with his insurance adjusters about the definition of acts of gods when Earth had so many different deities. I have wonderful news, she announced. The aliens fell silent, their expressions a mixture of hope and dread. We've finally processed your insurance application, Elena continued, triggering a wave of relief among the aliens. So we can proceed with the conquest? Zex Toral asked, frills quivering with anticipation. Almost. We just need one final item, a comprehensive environmental impact assessment. The room's temperature seemed to drop several degrees. Environmental impact, of course, Elena said, sliding across yet another binder. Any conquest must comply with Earth's environmental protection statutes. This requires detailed analysis of how your occupation would affect every terrestrial ecosystem. Vrill, looking increasingly like someone who regretted ever learning to read, opened the binder. This says we need to conduct field studies in person, in every major biome on the planet. Naturally, Elena agreed. The Amazon rainforest, the Sahara Desert, both polar regions, all major mountain ranges, every significant marine environment. That's hundreds of locations, 1,412 to be precise, Elena corrected. The good news is that you can conduct simultaneous studies. By the end of the week, alien scientists were scattered across Earth, taking soil samples in the Gobi Desert, measuring water quality in the Mariana Trench, and counting penguin populations in Antarctica. What the aliens didn't realize was that each research team was carefully monitored by Earth military forces, who studied alien technology, tactics and physiology with each passing day. They've actually provided comprehensive data on their own biological weaknesses, General Rivera marveled, reviewing reports from Antarctica. This team documented exactly how their species responds to cold, and the Amazon group detailed their respiratory limitations in high humidity. Elena added. Back at UN headquarters, a junior assistant approached Elena with a worried expression. Miss Chen, what happens when they complete the environmental impact study? Elena smiled calmly. Oh, they won't. When they submit their first draft, we'll inform them that the required reporting format changed last week, and if they finish that version, then we'll introduce them to the concept of public comment periods. Each study will require review by at least 10,000 concerned citizens, each of whom can request clarification. The assistant's eyes widened. That's diabolical. That's bureaucracy. Elena corrected. Earth's greatest weapon. 6 months into what was now known throughout the hegemony as the Earth situation, Zex Toral received an unexpected ray of hope. His environmental assessment teams had somehow, against all odds, completed their studies ahead of schedule. We did it, he announced triumphantly, dropping a stack of reports onto the conference table. Every ecosystem, every measurement, every ridiculous requirement, done. Elena examined the first page, her expression unreadable. Then she set it down and removed her glasses. Grand Admiral, she said softly, I regret to inform you that we've discovered a critical compliance issue. Vril made a noise like a deflating balloon. What? Now? Zex Toral's eye twitch had become so pronounced that the entire left side of his face spasmed continuously. These documents were processed using the standard Galactic translation matrix, Elena explained. However, Earth regulations require all official submissions to be manually translated into all 147 recognized Earth languages. 147 languages, the Admiral whispered. Yes, and each translation must be certified by a specifically qualified notary. 3 days later, the hegemony's finest linguists arrived, only to discover that Earth's notaries were proving remarkably elusive. The Swahili notary is on vacation, reported one frustrated alien. The Welsh notary only works every third Tuesday, complained another. The Sanskrit notary exists, but only takes appointments made in person during a full moon, a third wailed. In his flagship quarters, now more resembling a paper storage facility than a command center, Zex Toral reviewed reports from home. Half the Galactic Council is laughing at us, he muttered. 6 months and we haven't fired a single weapon. Meanwhile, in the linguist's work area, 2 aliens were engaged in a heated argument. I'm telling you this human idiom makes no sense, insisted one. How can time be both money and of the essence? Is essence a form of currency? That's nothing, replied another, surrounded by dictionaries. I've spent 3 days trying to translate pushing paper into Navajo. The closest equivalent translates back as moving dead tree skin with sadness. 8 months into the paperwork siege, the breaking point finally arrived in the form of Commander Vril's spectacular nervous breakdown. It began during a routine meeting about the proper formatting of appendices in the Punjabi translation of the environmental impact statement. Vril, who hadn't slept in what appeared to be weeks, suddenly stood up, scales flickering between colors like a broken neon sign. Do you know, he said with eerie calm, that I once commanded the assault on the Arcturus Nebula. 300 ships under my control, 17 planets conquered in a standard month. Elena looked up from her tablet. That's very impressive, Commander. And now, Vril continued, his voice rising, I dream in triplicate. I see form fields when I close my eyes. Last night I found myself alphabetizing my food. With a primal scream that would haunt the nightmares of everyone present, Vril grabbed the nearest stack of papers and began eating them, page by page, before being escorted out by concerned subordinates. In orbit, the hegemony fleet had dwindled to less than half its original size. Most ships had returned home due to what official reports called administrative reassignment, but what everyone knew was really running away from paperwork. The remaining vessels were critically undermanned as crew members were reassigned to handle the ever-growing document processing requirements. Meanwhile, Earth had been busy. Orbital defense grid at 98% capacity, General Rivera reported during the Emergency Council meeting. Reverse-engineered shield technology implemented at all major cities. 1st Battalion of ships using modified hegemony propulsion systems, ready for deployment. And the aliens? Asked the Secretary General, completely oblivious. They're too buried in paperwork to notice what we're building right under their noses. The next day, Elena entered Zex Toral's makeshift office carrying a single sheet of paper. The Grand Admiral, once a proud warrior, now surrounded by filing cabinets and sporting a permanent eye twitch, looked up wearily. What fresh bureaucratic hell have you brought me today? Actually, Elena said, laying the paper on his desk. I think it's time we resolved this situation. Zex Toril stared suspiciously. Resolved? As if on cue, the sky outside his window lit up as Earth's new defense grid activated, thousands of satellites and platforms revealing themselves in unison. You've been, the alien commander whispered. Stalling, building, learning, Elena suggested. Yes, all of that. But now I believe it's time we discussed your graceful exit strategy. Grand Admiral Zex Toril stared at the document Elena had placed before him. It was suspiciously thin compared to the reams of paperwork that had consumed the last 8 months of his life. The Conquest Withdrawal Agreement, he read aloud, his voice hollow. A simple, straightforward document, Elena explained with a knowing smile. Just one signature required. The alien commander scanned the text, his eye twitched as he reached a particular clause. Planet Earth is hereby classified as too bureaucratically complex to be worth conquering, he read. It provides you a face-saving explanation for your superiors, Elena pointed out. Much better than admitting humans outmaneuvered you with file folders. Zex Toril stared out the window at Earth's newly revealed defense grid, built while his finest warriors were hunting down notaries and filling out insurance forms. This document, he asked, is fully compliant with all regulations. No missing forms, no required translations, no committees need to review it. None whatsoever. Without another word, the Grand Admiral signed the paper, nearly breaking the pen in his grip. The hegemony hereby officially designates Earth as an administrative hazard zone, he declared. May whatever gods you believe in have mercy on anyone foolish enough to invade you. 1 year to the day after the hegemony's hasty retreat, Elena Chen stood on the platform in front of the United Nations building, trying not to look smug and failing spectacularly. The Secretary-General draped the medal around her neck, a golden paperclip on a blue ribbon, the newly created Excellence in Defense of Bureaucracy Award. The crowd erupted in applause. Miss Chen, he said, you have proven that humanity's most annoying trait may also be our greatest strength. The reception afterward was attended by diplomats from across the galaxy. Earth had become something of a celebrity in interstellar circles, the planet that defeated the mighty hegemony without firing a shot. Is it true, asked an ambassador with tentacles for hair, that your tax code caused 3 of their accountants to resign and become space monks? Only 3, Elena replied with a raised eyebrow. They got off easy. In the months following the hegemony's withdrawal, 17 different species had requested diplomatic relations with Earth, each sending representatives to learn what they called bureaucratic warfare. The waiting list for Elena's seminars on strategic form creation stretched into the next fiscal year. General Rivera approached, champagne in hand. The Galactic Council is voting next week on our membership application. They're in for a surprise, Elena said. I submitted it in triplicate with 73 appendices. Was that necessary? Of course not. But now they'll be so relieved when they deal with normal humans that they'll fast-track our approval. In her office at the newly established Department of Administrative Defense, a plaque displayed Elena's favorite quote, "Never underestimate the power of fine print." Beneath it sat a small box from Zex Toril. Inside was a single sheet with just 3 words, "You win." Paperwork.